Julia Basili, who's here as well, who will be supporting with any questions that you may have on the chat, sharing documents and links of any of the information that we're sharing with you today. We also ask that you use the chat. Well, you could also speak up. You can just unmute and speak up, and also use the chat if you want to second a motion or bring forward a motion. You should be able to see at the top of your screen 2 tabs, one that says English slides and the other one that says Français followed by my name. So I am currently sharing my screen, which is the French slide deck, and Bryn is sharing the English slide deck. So again, you can toggle from one to the other. We don't have a bilingual slide deck, we have 2 separate English and French. Alors, je vais répéter en français, même s'il y a de la traduction. Pour celles qui voudraient voir les diapos en français, je les partage en français. Donc, vous allez voir 2 onglets en haut de votre écran, en haut ou en bas, en fait. Un onglet qui dit English Slides, l'autre onglet qui dit français suivi de mon nom. Donc, vous pouvez changer de diapo en anglais ou en français selon votre préférence. And lastly, we have several votes that we're going to be doing during this special meeting. We'll be using the polling feature of Zoom for the votes. So a box will come up and you will have anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds to answer yes, no, or an abstention. And we'll all be able to see the results of the vote as well. So I guess lastly, before I pass it back to you, CJ, I just want to make sure that people are changing their names on the Zoom. This really helps us with just having be able to track who's at this meeting. This meeting is closed to members. We do have some staff who are present here for different purposes, but they will not be voting during the votes. So we ask that all members please change your name or rename. So 3 little dots at the top of your video screen, choose rename. We ask that you put your first name, your last name, your preferred pronouns so that we know how to address you. M for midwife, S for student, or SF sage-femme, E pour étudiant, et the acronym of the location, of your location, the province or territory where you are living and working from joining this meeting. So AB for Alberta, BC for British Columbia, QC for Quebec, etc. Have I forgotten anything?
I don't think so. I think you've covered it all.
So let's just check if we have quorum.
We do. I've received word from Julia that we are good to go.
Excellent.
All right. I will call this meeting to order on March 26th at 1:09 p.m. in my time zone. Welcome again, everyone. We appreciate you being here today. The purpose of this meeting is to consider and to vote on the adoption of a new set of bylaws and revised articles of continuance for CAM. No other business will be conducted today. The Canadian Association of Midwives was incorporated in January of 2001. The bylaws were then amended for the first time in 2008 to include the National Council of Indigenous Midwives as a member association, and updated again in 2013 to ensure compliance with the amended Canada Not-for-Profit Corporations Act and regulations. The governance structure, however, has not changed since incorporation in 2001. And so today is both the culmination of many years of work and much effort and the beginning of a new chapter at CAM. Next slide, please. Before we begin with the business at hand, I'd like to introduce you to our governance committee who have put in a ton of work and who are leading this initiative. So we have Claire Dion Fletcher, who is CAM's Vice President and the Governance Committee Chair. We have Josiane Giroux, CAM Secretary, and we have Alicia Julian Reed, NCIM Co-Chair. So thank you very much to all of you for your hard work and dedication. Next slide, please, which includes a list of our current board members. And I won't take the time to read them all, but many of them are here. And please input, as we move through the conversation today, as you will. We've been there through all of these decisions and discussions, and it's, as I said, a big culmination of a lot of work for us all. So now I'll move to the next slide, which includes the agenda for today's meeting. So that includes, of course, our welcome, our attendance and verification of quorum, which we have, our adoption of the agenda, presentation of the governance reform process to date and also next steps. Then the resolutions, which include the special resolution of the full members and member associations, the special resolution of the student members, and the bylaws. And then we will end with an adjournment. We can now adopt the proposed agenda of the special meeting of members as seen on the slide in front of you here and the one that I've just read. Would somebody like to propose a motion to adopt the agenda as well as a seconder? We ask that you please use the chat box to move and to second. Be sure to include your full name in the chat. So I have Becky Wood, who has moved to adopt the agenda, which is seconded by Adrian Carruthers. Thank you. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion on our agenda today? You can share your comments or questions by using the chat box or by raising your hand. We will now bring the motion forward for a vote.
Okay, 10 more seconds.
CJ, just in the chat, I'm seeing a message saying there was a hand raised that we may have missed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not actually seeing anyone with their hand currently raised, so we're sorry. And if you could just please raise your hand again, we'll take a peek.
I will end the poll.
All right, motion adopted. The agenda is adopted. Okay, moving to our next slide. I'm going to provide some background on the governance reform process. As a board of directors at CAM, we have been discussing the need for governance reform for many years. In 2022, the board decided it was time and voted to dedicate resources and energy to taking on this huge change. This was after the CAM theory of change was created in 2021 to better define our organization's intended impact and the values that guide our work. Next slide, please. In 2021, the CAM staff team was reorganized to meet the new needs of the organization, and inevitably it became clear that the governance model would also, of course, need to be reviewed. So you'll see on this slide some of the questions that guided our initial discussions and conversations, which included deep reflection on our intended impact, asking ourselves if we have the right people around the table to achieve our goals, asking if our governance structure is aligned with our values, and also asking ourselves if we are ensuring equitable and appropriate representation of all CAM members on the board. Moving into our next slide, out of these reflections, and after, of course, much consideration, we formed an understanding of what key changes to the CAM governance reform process would look like and what we're really trying to achieve as an organization. And that is better representation of the diversity of our membership on the board, a skill set to support the successful implementation of our theory of change, and of course, better engagement of our members, all of you. All right, next slide. Since the incorporation in 2001, this, mostly geographical structure has been in place. As you can see on the screen here, it includes 15 directors representing a number of associations, member associations, as well as 4 officers for a total of 19 individuals on the board of directors. And one goal in this governance reform process was for us to streamline that number and bring it down. Next slide, which details our process, which, as you can see, has been quite lengthy. And in 2022, we began by hosting over 20 focus groups with identified internal and external partners. The data collected was used to inform our process and our thinking as we worked on a new governance structure for CAM. And in June 2023, we presented the initial governance model and shared a refined version during 2 information sessions at our last in-person CAM conference in October of 2023. We also presented the new proposed structure at the AGM in June of 2024, and subsequent to the AGM on October 23rd, 2004, the CAM Board of Directors approved these new bylaws, following consultation with legal counsel to ensure compliance of those bylaws with the Corporations Canada Act. And this meeting here today is being held so that all of you, our members, can adopt this new set of bylaws for our association. The new bylaws, if approved, will come into effect as of the date of the certificate of amendment issued to CAM by Corporations Canada. Essentially, what that means is that they will come into effect shortly after today's meeting.
CJ, if I could just interrupt for 1 second, just to address a couple of comments in the chat, if you don't mind. Just a couple of things on the previous slide. So if we can go back, I'm just going to go back to the previous slide and ask Bryn to do the same of the current governance model. So SMAC, S-M-A-C, stands for Student Midwives Association of Canada. SMAC is not an actual recognized as a member association of CAM under the current or the up to now bylaws that we've had. And CARM, again, this is what it's looked like to date in terms of the actual member association. So CARM exists, and CJ will speak about that in just one moment, looking to now and the future. But as of now, CARM is not registered as a member association per se. So just to make those differentiations.
Antonia, while we're pausing, if you wouldn't mind just going through the instructions one more time to look at the French translation.
Yes.
Just I'm having a few questions of people unable to access. Thank you.
Yeah, I will. And CARM, C-A-R-M, stands for the Canadian Alliance of Racialized Midwives. Again, we'll be talking about CARM and other national organizations that have formed more recently in the coming slides. So just because I can see that new people have joined since we've started, to help us keep track of who is voting and who is present at this meeting, in addition to the registration list that we have, we ask that you rename yourself on Zoom. So the 3 little dots at the top of your video screen, if you click on that, choose rename. We ask that you put your first and last name, your preferred pronouns, M for midwife, S for student. You can leave it blank if you're neither, because we do have some staff that are here present. And please add, and also SF en français, E pour sage-femme et E pour étudiant. And we ask that you include the acronym of the province or territory where you are located. Thank you very much. Okay, CJ.
Thank you. I didn't see the chat there, so I'll try to keep an eye, but please keep interrupting me if I miss things. Okay, moving into our next slide. We've shared some of the history and the work to date, and I'd like to take a moment to talk to you about all of the things as a board that we've kept top of mind through this process. As the governance committee and the board had discussions and made decisions about how this process would unfold. So we know that provincial and territorial associations should be prioritized in the governance structure of CAM. This, of course, came through strongly and has been the way that we have operated since our inception. We also know that 7/8 provincial and territorial associations out of 11, so certainly the vast majority, are considered low capacity associations, meaning they do not have access to enough resources, administrative support, etc. We also know that 2 territories do not yet have associations, so Yukon and Nunavut. We know that provincial and territorial associations are best positioned to understand the context in which their midwives work and midwifery is operated. We know that, of course, those provincial and territorial associations understand the issues related to the kinds of practice, rural, remote, urban, the different kinds of models, working conditions, alternate practice models, etc. We also know that provinces and territories seek peer support through CAM. They seek networking support and opportunities and share resources. And of course, they want to see us as an organization provide more association strengthening support. In undertaking this process, as you'll see on the next slide, we wanted to ensure that new midwifery organizations that have been formed in recent years, so as you just heard, like CARM, and other new associations that may form in the future could be recognized within CAM's governance structure. We do not at this time have that flexibility. Some already formed groups include, as we've mentioned, the Canadian Alliance of Racialized Midwives and the Canadian Caucus of Queer and Trans Midwives. And as I said, right now in our structure, there are not readily available mechanisms for these associations to provide input at the board level or to the organization as a whole. Next slide. We also worked hard to ensure that as an organization, CAM is best positioned to achieve its intended impact. We know that this work currently, the way that we are structured, takes place under 3 pillars. So those are advocacy, promoting excellence, and association strengthening. And we want to be able to best carry our work under each of those pillars or areas with this new structure. Moving to our next slide, all of these elements kind of coming together form the foundation of CAM's proposed new structure and our recommendation to develop 3 advisory councils who will be responsible for providing strategic input to the board in the 3 key areas that I just spoke about in our theory of change. As always, of course, the board will continue to hold the fiduciary responsibility of the organization and maintain responsibility for governance and policy, financial oversight, and the executive director of retention and recruitment. So this change will, we hope, provide the board with even more input and expertise. So the individuals on the board and the group as a whole are well equipped to carry out their responsibilities as board members, which include, of course, things like championing the work of CAM, resourcing the organization through fundraising, and generally ensuring the organization is promoting the voice of midwives and midwifery on a national scale. So you'll see on this next slide that the advisory councils include, so they are the top yellow or orange, depending on the color on your screen, rectangles, the 3 advisory councils, the Midwifery Associations Advisory Council, or the MAAC, the Clinical Excellence Advisory Council, or the CEAC, and the Global Programs Advisory Council, or GPAC or GPAC. The board, which is the large horizontal green rectangle in the middle, the board will be made up of members of each advisory council plus 4 strategic agility positions. These were previously known as executive positions, and those are president, vice president, treasurer, and NCIM co-chair. And then you'll see on the bottom, the blue rectangles illustrate the 3 standing committees that will support the work of the board, and those include the Governance and Recruitment Committee, Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, and again, the Strategic Agility Committee. So this image as a whole is our new proposed structure. Moving to our next slide, which includes next steps for this process, which include a call for interest for the advisory councils, which will begin their work following our AGM on June 11th, our annual general meeting. We encourage you to keep your eyes on our newsletter and your emails for more information on how to become involved in the advisory councils. I'm just going to pause because I'm seeing a comment that the bottom of the slides don't display properly. Are you looking at the English or the French? Do you mind telling us so we can adjust? English, okay. I'll just give a moment to reload the presentation. Thank you for your patience. Okay,
Seems to be
fine
okay for most. Yeah.
Okay. Just wait till they come up again. Sometimes my Zoom anyway, when somebody else is screen sharing, it changes the size of the window. So you may need to yourself adjust the size of the window. Okay, now, great. Thank you. So on this slide, you'll see some of our next steps in this governance reform process, which, as I said, include a call for interest that will be coming into your inboxes soon. And these advisory councils will begin their work after the annual general meeting on June 11th. Following this annual general meeting, the CAM Board of Directors will call for nominations for the new Board of Directors. And in October, you can expect a special members meeting to take place virtually, much like this one, where the new board will be presented to members for approval, the slate of board members, and the current board will transition to the Midwifery Association's Advisory Council. We're, of course, kind of overviewing, as I said, a long process and much work. Briefly here, we want to ensure that folks have context. We also hope that you've had the chance to look at the video clip that was sent around with the notice of this meeting, as well as hosted on the webpage. And we hope you took time to review the FAQ document, frequently answered questions document, which answers many questions that people have brought to us thus far throughout this process. Okay, now moving on to the proposed resolutions. Next slide. So I'll ask you to please refer to your notice of meeting package, which includes, and I am just going to read them, Appendix A1, the text of the proposed special resolutions of the full members and member associations. Appendix A2, text of proposed special resolutions of the student members. Appendix B, the articles of amendment. Appendix C, restated articles of incorporation, and Appendix D, bylaws. As you can see in the chat, Julia has kindly put links to these documents, which were sent around in the emails, but are also posted currently on our webpage. Okay, moving on to the next slide. which is the special resolution of the full members and member associations. You can find this information on pages 3 and 4 of your package. And I'll give you a moment to take in the information on the screen, which outlines that this the CAM board is proposing collapsing its 5 classes of membership that currently exist into one class of voting members. This one class, as you'll see on the right side, the new proposed on the right side there, this one class would include member associations and all midwives and midwifery students who are members of their provincial or territorial associations or NCIM. I'm just going to pause for one more moment in case folks would like to read the screen before we move to the actual motion.
CJ, we just have a quick question. Were the honorary members before members of the public?
Were the honorary members members of the public? Honorary members were members that were like past leaders or members of CAM who we honored in this way here. What I'm going to do is move to the next slide.
Sure. And there's just a follow-up question to that. And was there a reason not to include them?
Yes. So what I'll do is I'll move to the next slide. We'll move the motion and then we'll open it up for questions and I can answer that question more fully. So I will now ask a board member to come forward to make the motion on the special resolution of the full members and member associations as displayed on the screen. So again, if you could include your name in the chat, please. So it is moved by Heather Heinrichs and seconded by Brittany Stairs. Thank you. So I will now open up the floor for discussion. And thank you. I think it was Betty Ann with the question. And maybe it's helpful if I just speak for a moment about the allied members and the honorary members. So the decision to remove these 2 categories really reflects how we've been functioning for many years. These categories have not been actively maintained, and in practice, very few individuals held these designations. So the board made a decision after much consideration that continuing to offer and administer these membership classes would require an administrative capacity, you know, for a very small group, which isn't really the best use of our resources. And we've decided in terms of recognizing individuals who've made significant contributions to CAM or to midwifery in Canada, the board feels that we need, you know, more meaningful, more flexible forms of recognition that we have already available. So, for example, through public acknowledgements at our conference, invitations to serve in advisory roles, awards, etc. And then in terms of allied members, we believe that the best way to invite the public, to invite supporters into a relationship with CAM, particularly for fundraising purposes, is through the future creation of an arm's length foundation. And this was a strategic decision by the board some time ago that really aligns with our long-term vision for sustainability and also public engagement. And of course, board members, governance committee members, please add things if you like.
CJ, we have a follow-up question. And does this mean that as we retire, we can no longer be members of CAM? Yes, you aren't anyway because we no longer are a member of our provincial association. And that's from Betty Ann Davis again. Thank you.
So yes, any midwife who is a member of their provincial or territorial association will maintain a membership with CAM or NCIM, of course.
And then from Heather, we have, does CAM have a definition of who is a midwife?
Again, I would refer to, sorry, I'm just reading the second question as well. Anyone who, both of these questions capture it. So one, do we have a definition of who is a midwife? And two, could you clarify what you mean by a member of the association? So at CAM, we have like one designation, one voting class of midwives as members. And so again, anyone who is a member of their provincial or territorial association or NCIM is a member of CAM. And we, if there are different membership classes in those provincial or territorial associations, that's not something we differentiate between. If you're a member of your jurisdictional association, then you are a member of CAM.
And CJ, maybe I could just add a little bit here because there is more detail in the actual bylaws in addition to this resolution. So just to be hyper clear. So again, just to repeat what CJ said, whether you're a practicing midwife, non-practicing midwife, whatever the status is around being a midwife, again, practicing, non-practicing, whether you're called an associate member with your provincial association, for example, you fall into the one class of voting midwife member at CAM. So we're not making that differentiation. I do want to say though, for the provinces or territories where there is no association, now I'm happy to say that there are less, that exists less and less now. However, we don't know what the future may hold. There is a provision in the bylaws that a midwife working in a jurisdiction where there is no provincial or territorial association and they cannot access a membership into NCIM, there's still a pathway for them to become a member of CAM. So that does exist, but we don't want anyone bypassing their provincial or territorial association or NCIM to become a CAM member.
The context. Are there any other questions on this resolution? Okay, we will now vote to adopt the resolution.
So the poll is up. Maybe hidden behind one of your windows. It's up and I will leave it open for 60 seconds. Another 10 seconds, un autre 10 secondes pour voter. Okay, je vais fermer le vote, amending the poll. And CJ, you should be able to see the results. Everyone
Okay.
should see them on the screen.
Mhm. Thank you. The motion to adopt the special resolution of the full members and member associations as presented has passed. Thank you. Okay, moving to our next slide and our next resolution. This is the special resolution of the student members, and you can find this information on pages 6 and 7 of your package. The CAM board is proposing that midwifery students who are members of their provincial or territorial association or NCIM will now become voting members of CAM. I will now ask a board member to come forward to make the following motion. And I will give you a moment to read the slide and think of questions if you have any. So the motion is moved by Adrian Carruthers and seconded by Nicole Waith. Thank you. I will now open the floor for discussion.
Do we have a sense of how many students are in the meeting right now?
That's a great question.
CJ, we do have a question from Emmanuel. I would like to understand the reason behind this, please.
I don't have the ability to quickly see how many students are on the call. I don't know if you do, Tonya. In the meantime, I can speak a little bit about this discussion, this decision by the board. This was one that we carefully considered, not to imply that we didn't carefully consider others, but this one, had a significant amount of discussion around it. Partly because we value student midwives deeply. They're the future of our profession and we want their voices to be heard. And the board ultimately decided that the best way to ensure equity and inclusion is to move towards one class of voting members. And this brings students fully into the fold alongside practicing midwives. And it really removes any sense of separation or hierarchy in our membership structure. It reinforces that everyone, including students, should have a voice and vote in the organization's direction. And again, I want to stress that this decision was not made lightly or quickly. It certainly reflects years of conversations, consultations, and governance work. And we really believe that this change supports a more unified CAM.
We just have a comment saying this is also helpful for Indigenous midwifery students.
Absolutely.
While we wait for maybe other questions or comments, I just want to say it's difficult to see. I'm trying to go through the names. It's difficult to see at first glance if there are students and who is a student. If you want to share or put an S or an E for étudiant in French next to your name, that would be helpful. I guess I'm just wanting to say you would vote when we do go to the vote. Please ensure you do vote because it's a change specifically for your class of membership that we are now changing, and so your vote is important.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and CJ, we have another question. Is it compulsory for student midwives to join CAM? How many student midwives does CAM have?
I'm not sure about the numbers, if you know that, Tonya, but again, it's similar to the way it works for midwives. If you are a student member of your provincial or territorial association or NCIM, then again, you are a CAM member.
I'm going to ask Janet or Bryn, someone who can just get the most accurate number. I don't want to say anything that's not accurate.
Mm.
I just want to underscore again what CJ said, and same concept for midwives. We don't want people bypassing the membership to their provincial or territorial association or NCIM. So as long as a student is a member of any of those associations, they are a member of CAM.
We have a comment that it is not a requirement for students to join the association in Manitoba.
Sonia, do you
On a
mind
une
reading?
question en français, CJ?
Yeah.
Alors, Céline demande, est-ce que toutes les associations ont des sages-femmes ont des membres étudiants? So do all associations of midwives have student members?
That's a great question. I hesitate to speak authoritatively, but because there's always a chance that my knowledge is incorrect. But my understanding is that yes, there is a pathway in each jurisdiction for students to become members of their provincial or territorial association.
We're seeing a few more comments that we don't think it's that most MEPs require students to join the association. It's not a requirement for students to join the association. The association does not provide primary insurance, same in Northwest Territories. D'après vous, comment une étudiante peut être comprendre les difficultés? So how would a student understand the difficulties or the strategies to adopt? Tonya, correct me if my translation is wrong.
Hold on, I'm trying to keep track. There's a lot in the chat. It's great.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So CJ, we have a question like how would a student be able to understand the difficulties or the strategies to adopt?
How are they going to like understand kind of the conversations that are happening
Yeah.
at CAM?
And Tonya's triple checking my translation there.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tony. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, CJ, I'm just going to jump in with some answers too, if that's okay. I don't mean to overstep.
Of course. Yeah, go ahead.
We want to, when we can like validate and repeat, we want to make sure that all your questions are answered, obviously. So as far as we are aware, nowhere is it mandatory for a student to be a member of their association, by the way. We know that for midwives, it is mandatory everywhere except for Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Okay. Students, I do not believe it is a requirement anywhere. So it is an elective decision to become a member or not of the association. And if they are a member of their provincial or territorial association or NCIM, they automatically become a member of CAM. The question around, it's in French here, d'après vous, comment une étudiante peut-elle comprendre les difficultés ou les stratégies à adopter? I'm not too sure I understand the question. Je suis pas certaine de comprendre la question tout à fait. Si on parle de difficultés ou stratégies de ce qu'on adopte aujourd'hui, toutes les étudiantes sages-femmes qui sont membres de l'ACSF auraient reçu la même invitation pour participer aujourd'hui à la réunion. Si jamais je ne réponds pas à votre question, sentez-vous bien à l'aise de préciser ou de même dire tout fort votre préoccupation?
I can also answer, I think, what
Ms. Mack?
Rita is asking. Go ahead, Rita.
Je peux parler?
Oui.
OK. La question, c'est que lorsque tu as une étudiante qui arrive, on va dire, première année, comment elle va savoir les difficultés qui se font durant la profession lorsqu'elle va travailler, alors qu'elle vient juste d'arriver? Et comment on peut laisser une personne qui vient juste à s'adapter à la profession, donner son opinion à des choses ou bien à des professionnels qui ont une expérience de plusieurs années. Je ne sais pas, c'est dans ce but-là. C'est quelqu'un qui vient juste d'arriver. Comment il peut donner son avis à quelque chose, à une problématique, par exemple, qui date de plusieurs années, et elle va donner son avis, elle vient juste d'arriver.
Oui, j'ai bien compris. Je vais traduire pour CJ. So CJ, I'll translate for you. So the question was more around how could a first-year student, for example, someone who's just starting.
Sorry.
You want me to wait?
I just was flipping back. I was listening to the interpretation.
Oh, so did you understand?
I think so. Essentially, how can students understand the issues in the profession and
Especially if
input
they're
into,
new.
especially if
Especially
they're
if
new. Yeah, I think it's and this is part of the reason in many ways why this was a carefully considered decision and the result of many conversations at the board level. And I mean, I could give a number of reasons. One that comes to mind most readily is, of course, that, you know, students come to midwifery school, midwifery education programs, whatever kind of learning with a whole host of lived and living experiences. And that really rich diversity of our membership is something that we would love to have represented in the decisions that we make. Currently, also, the pathways for communication with our members are the same, whether you are a student or a midwife. So the information that we disseminate is received in the same way by each of those humans. And they are able to, you know, access all of the programming that we have to offer, all of the meetings that we have, all of the opportunities in the same way that midwives do. Yes, as Alicia's saying, the goal of being inclusive and promoting many voices to be heard. Claire, do you want to add?
Yeah, perfect.
I just wanted to add, just in our decision-making process, and CJ, I think that's a really good overview. I think it's easy also for us to think that and to say that students don't know as much because they're new to the profession, which, you know, in many cases is true, especially if you're new to the program. But there's also times when we're voting on things that that like just because we're midwives for a long time doesn't mean we always know like have as much information on the things we're voting on. We all bring different experiences, including students. And I think it's like our responsibility as members and it's students' responsibility as members to like learn and understand what we're voting on. And that can happen at various stages of your learning when you put in the time to do that. And so I think there are times when we all don't know as much about the decisions that we're making, and we all have that responsibility.
Thank you very much, Claire. That's important context for sure.
I wanted to just, there was a comment about SMAC, and I just want that to be clarified. The Student Midwives Association of Canada.
Yeah, I'm scrolling. I don't see it here yet.
I think it was a question of if they were a member of SMAC, are they a member of CAM?
If they are SMAC, are they a member of CAM? Currently, no. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No.
But SMAC is not an officially recognized member association by us as of yet. We have a student member on our board who certainly has always brought a really valuable input to those conversations. And the SMAC itself, our understanding is that they have not been functioning in like a real practical way in some years. So really, when students come into this role on the board, often one of their first priorities is to engage with as many of the students as they can across the different programs across the country, regardless of those students' membership to SMAC. So certainly that organization, that association may go on to become like functioning again with input from all of the students across our country. But irregardless of that fact, we would like there to be a pathway for students to participate either with SMAC or not. Thank you all for your comments in the chat. I'm not seeing, I don't think we've missed any questions, but please, Julia, correct me if I'm wrong. Julia's keeping a very careful eye there.
I believe we've covered the question. So if we are missing it, please retype it. And Tonya had just put in there that there are 351 student members as of January.
Okay,
We do have a
Oh.
question. What percentage of members is that overall?
So just roughly 2,100. So what's that math?
Get a calculator out.
Less than 25%.
$351 over 2,100. We can give it as a fraction.
17%, 16%.
Thank you. Okay. One more.
CJ, we have another question. How would students vote? I think that having the new structure displayed would help us understand how their vote would work.
How would they vote? Is your question at meetings like this one? If so, when we come to a meeting like this, our staff, for example, Julia, is looking at those who have registered and of course those who are attending and voting, who are voting members, I'm sorry, and they would vote in the same way as midwives would. Tony, can you look at the...
Yeah, I'm just, so Céline, Emmanuel, I'm just wondering, est-ce qu'il y a une question que vous voulez dire tout fort ou...
And CJ, after, we also have Louisa with a hand up.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Louisa.
Yeah, I guess my question is, like, let's say in a meeting like this, we have more students participating than actual midwives. Would that change the way decisions are made? Like, do we need a percentage of midwives versus a percentage of students, or like people representing all groups? So then, like, it's not swayed, the decision is not swayed one way or the other. I guess sometimes it can happen, right? Where like midwives are busy and they can attend these meetings and then you have more students available. So how do we gauge for that?
Thank you, Lisa. I understand your question. I think that as I said, the way that students vote would be the same as midwives. So with one voting class, we are not going to distinguish between a vote from a student and a vote from a practicing midwife. Those votes will be the same. So yes, in theory, if at a meeting there was the percentage of students was higher than the percentage of midwives, then that's who is voting on that day. And I mean, as Claire said, it is really all of our responsibilities as members, regardless of if we're studying and busy with studying and all of the time and energy that requires, or if we are practicing midwives and busy with our clinical practice or other roles that we may have. It's our responsibility as members of CAM to come to the meetings, to engage with the association, to understand the issues, and to show up and vote.
Maybe CJ can just add to that, just for some historical context, having been here for 20 years now, just I think in the history of CAM and its AGMs and member meetings, we've always seen the an equal proportion, even if the number of attendees is very small or medium size, whatever it is, the proportion always remains. So when you look at the proportion of the number of midwives and students by geographical location, it's very proportionate to that number of membership. And yeah, we have never seen a larger number of students attend any event. It's proportionate, and I would actually say my personal observation is it's actually quite less because of their unavailability, and they are very busy as well while they're students, and so they actually don't have the ability to show up as much.
Claire?
Just to give the context of NCIM, where student members are of the same, we'll call it voting class, even though it's not really a vote, voting class as midwives, the same thing happens, where even though we have a lot of student members at NCIM, and my guess would be our proportion of student members is higher than our midwife members, I would say in our like meetings and decision-making processes, there's always a good midwife group in addition to the students. And I would be interested to hear from Marita, what if that is similar in their province where students are voting members, or any other province where the students are voting members of the organizations, the provincial associations.
Happy to chime in if you'd like. So we actually just changed our bylaws, and I was incorrect in the chat. So anyone who didn't see my update, our current bylaws do not actually require our students to be members any longer, but they are able to vote if they are members. But in practice, that's not really, we've only just changed our bylaws, so it's not something we're actually seeing happening in practice, and we are going through a bylaw revision process again to sort of address some of the pieces that we've noticed in the last year since we adopted them. So I feel like Alberta can't really give any helpful guidance on this particular piece.
Thank you, Marita. And Claire? Okay, I'm going to pause for another moment before we move to a vote.
Not a question, but we do have a comment. It could be a financial reason to join or not join a provincial or territorial association. So student midwives who have low income may not be well represented.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for this rich discussion. We will now vote to adopt the resolution.
Right. So the poll is open. If you don't see it, it may be hidden behind one of your windows that you may want to minimize. It's there. Leave it open for 60 seconds. Je vais laisser le vote ouvert pour 60 secondes. Okay, I will end the poll.
Thank you. A motion to adopt the special resolution of the student members as presented has passed. Thank you.
And we just have a few more comments in the chat that may be considering decreased membership for students, and just some comments, and it may already be reduced in many provinces. It's $30 in Quebec.
Yeah.
It's lower in Alberta too.
Yes, it is. I believe in all jurisdictions, significantly lower.
And it looks like Ontario has a nice initiative to support student members when you're renewing your membership.
That's a very cool idea. I don't think I knew that. Thank you. Okay. Moving to our next slide, which has the special resolution to adopt the Articles of Amendment. You can find this information on pages 8, 9, and 10 of your meeting package. And as you can see on the screen, the CAM board is proposing the following amendments. So again, the one class of voting members, and then a slight language change for the liquidation of property section. Just gonna give you a moment to read. And then I will ask a board member to come forward to make a motion as well as a seconder. Thank you. The motion is moved by Adrian Carruthers and seconded by Brittany Stairs. I will now open the floor for discussion. Go ahead, Nicole.
Sorry, I was just still looking at the previous slide before you switched it. So can you explain the difference or the reason for the change? Was it because in a liquidation situation, any remaining assets would go to charity, and now it's just, okay, is that the main difference?
Yeah, we actually just loosened up the language a little bit, so the concept is the same, but it was a little bit more detailed in the original articles of continuance, and we're just amending it to be qualified donee. So it could be any type of charitable organization. Before it was specific to an organization with a very similar mandate. If that organization did not exist, then we would go to a charity, and now it's just keeping it open to any type of qualified donee.
Okay, thank you.
And we have a question. Are there actual assets we need to liquidate?
No,
No.
this would really just be in the eventuality of the end of camp.
Hmm.
Which we do not foresee.
I was going to say, which we shall not see.
Nicole, I see your hand up.
Is that up
Sorry,
from the floor?
it's
all
all,
good.
sorry.
Thanks, Nicole.
I could just add, CJ, for those who are maybe less aware of Corporations Canada. In addition to bylaws, there's the articles of amendment are for our articles of our articles are, it used to be letters patent, and in 2013 this switched over to articles, and it's basically the key information from the bylaws. So it's really a governance document that needs to be submitted to Corporations Canada for our incorporation, and to have our certificate of continuance. And it's really teasing out some key aspects that are in the bylaws, which we are going to be looking at next.
Thank you. That's helpful. I'm going to just give another few moments. Okay, we will now vote to adopt the resolution.
Okay, the vote has been launched. Le vote est ouvert. Si vous voyez pas la fenêtre, elle peut être cachée derrière une autre fenêtre. Could be hidden behind another window. Mm.
Thank you all for sitting in comfortable silence with us as we wait for the vote.
Don't you always feel like singing that Jeopardy song when this is happening?
Julia did ask me if I had some entertainment prepared for you all in these voting breaks, and I'm sorry to say I do not. We can look at each other's faces.
Okay, I think we're complete, so I will end the poll and share the results.
Right, the motion to amend CAM's articles of continuance as presented has passed. Thank you. Okay, moving on. And now to adopt our new proposed bylaws. They can be found on pages 14 to 34 of your notice of meeting package. Yes, I'm aware this is a long document. I hope you've had the time to review it prior to this meeting. Maybe it's helpful to hear, I mean, I think these are things we've already said, but it may be helpful to hear that the board, of course, who are, as we said, made up of leaders from each member association, have gone through these bylaws in great detail. In fact, 2 final iterations, and have spent a significant amount of time with this document and working together to understand all of the implications for members, for member associations, and future midwives as well. So again, this is a really big piece of work and time and energy coming to fruition here. I will now ask a member to come forward to make the motion to adopt the bylaws, and a seconder. The bylaws as presented and included in the notice of meeting package, just to be clear. The motion is moved by Brittany Stairs and is seconded by Marita Obst. I will now open the floor for discussion. Please feel free to raise your hand, to put a comment in the chat if you have questions.
So we have a question. Is it possible to provide a brief overview of the changes which are proposed to the bylaws?
We could, if it would be helpful, bring up again the image of the proposed new structure, just for folks to reflect on, given the depth and the breadth of the document itself. The short answer is no, there's not a way to briefly provide, to be sure we capture all of the changes, but the changes to the bylaws and the new language reflect this proposed structure and how it would be carried out. So as we said earlier, the new bylaws would in effect allow for the creation of the 3 advisory councils, as well as this new board structure. And subsequently then the committees. The committees aren't detailed, of course, in the bylaws. That's not where they need to be, but this is the net effect of the bylaws. But I'm happy to take questions about this structure if anything appears confusing.
And I'll just add, I guess the second significant changes, and we've already discussed it, it's the class of membership. That would be the other
Yes, thank you.
the piece, the details about the 1 voting class and the additional pathway that you wouldn't have seen in this resolution around how a midwife or a midwifery student could also become a member of CAM if there is no provincial or territorial association and they are not eligible to be a member of NCIM. That is also has been added. Should we go back to the slide with the structure, both in English and in French? Is that helpful?
It's up in English, so if you could throw it up
sorry,
in French,
I'll go
that would
back.
be good. That's okay. And yes, Valerie, it is to reflect the changes to CAM's governance structure, exactly.
just Valerie's comment, I could say, you know, things around number of days for notice of meetings, whether it's for board, the directors, the officers, the members for AGMs, the way in which we conduct our business, virtual meetings, our voting processes, none of this has changed in any significant way, other than perhaps some language updates, but nothing has changed in those processes. We clearly outline in the bylaws the nomination process, so there is more detail than there was in the past, even with some, like the timeline. So when does the call for nomination go out, whether it's for advisory councils, for the board, it's listed more explicitly. And committees, the same way they were in the previous bylaws, it's up to the board to determine the blue. So the blue, the 3 blue committees at the bottom, which more or less already exist. We're just tweaking them somewhat, but they're not listed in the bylaws. So committees, standing committees to the board has full authority to dissolve or create new committees, and that's not tied to the bylaws, only the advisory councils and the board structure. Also, I guess the other thing I could mention, if this is helpful, is we've updated the language of member association to midwifery association, who can be a member of CAM. And the idea there, I think CJ, you've already said this, but it's to capture the existing member associations, so provincial, territorial, NCIM, but also, you know, you mentioned CARM, you mentioned QTM, the Caucus of Queer and Trans Midwives of Canada, and whatever future relevant midwifery organization could be created in the future as well.
And I think we have said this. Just gonna shut my door. There's a helicopter. Wonderful. It's not unexpected where I live. The bylaws will not change, of course, how the operation of the organization happens day to day. And although this doesn't speak to content of the bylaws, you have that in the PDF document in front of you. I would say that this change brings our bylaws in line with how we've evolved as an organization. It really clarifies roles, improves decision-making processes, and it sets us up for what's next. And also, again, I think we've said this piece, but helpful to reiterate for folks that the bylaws were reviewed and had input from a legal team as well. And they therefore reflect best practices and align with the Canada Not-for-Profit Corporations Act.
Right, CJ, we have a question. What are the organizations that belong to the MAAC?
So currently that is the all of the provinces and territories, in effect, the board as it is right now. So leaders from all of the provinces and territories, as well as NCIM. This change will also include will include CARM, and provide a pathway for other associations or organizations as they should develop. So there is some flexibility there, and details of how those, like who will make up the members, and how those advisory councils will run. Those will be included and are included in the terms of reference for each of those advisory councils, which is in its final stages of development by both the governance committee and the board.
Right, and we have the same question. So what are the organizations that belong to the CEAC and GPAC?
So again, those advisory councils, the membership will be detailed in the terms of reference, and there will be a call out for members to each of these advisory councils coming to your inbox in the next few weeks. So keep your eye out for that. I can say broadly, this is not reflected in the bylaws, the membership of the CEAC and the GPAC, but more broadly, the CEAC, the Clinical Excellence Advisory Council, will be made up of practicing midwives, educators, researchers, kind of, all of the individuals that we need to best address our goals under that clinical excellence pillar of our work. And the Global Programs Advisory Council will similarly hold people who have expertise in this program, in our global program, and just in this kind of work more broadly.
And then I'm actually not sure if this is a comment or a question, as I was not familiar with the last two organizations. Louisa, did CJ resolve that for you?
And yes, Claire, maybe thank you. That's helpful to just say more clearly. These advisory councils do not exist yet, the clinical excellence and the global programs. And so no, they would not be advisory councils that you folks would be familiar with. The terms of reference, though, again, will be shared. And they're quite detailed. Okay. So we'll move, yes, thank you, back to the slide, which includes the motion to adopt the bylaws as presented and included in the notice of meeting package. And we will now vote to adopt the resolution.
My cue.
Thank you all for your questions and your engagement today on all of these. It's been really good to have these conversations with you all, and we hope they'll certainly continue.
We have all the eligible votes.
Okay.
Here we go.
The motion to adopt the bylaws as presented and included in the notice of meeting package has passed. Thank you. I feel like I should pop some champagne, but I don't have any. Moving on, we have a few more things. Moving on to our next slide. Thank you all. So part of the reason I wanted to ideally have some champagne to pop, non-alcoholic or alcoholic, is because a number of people, not limited to the people you see on the screen here, but certainly the folks on this who are listed here on the screen, Alex, Elizabeth, Claire, Sarah, Tonya, Julia, lots of CAM staff folks have put in significant effort and time. In particular, I would like to thank Alex, who I briefly mentioned. CAM, we conducted 20 focus groups, and that was all Alex doing all of that work, and really Alex's vision for this change to bring our organization more in line with our values. So a huge thank you to everybody listed here for your time and your energy. And is Alex still on the call? Beautiful. I don't know if you want to say something. Don't feel obligated, but please do if you want to.
I just want to say thanks, everyone. This was such a collective effort, and it took a long time to do a good job of it. And every time we thought we had a timeline, we had to extend it a little bit to do it in a good way. And you've done a beautiful job. I'm so excited. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. And of course, thank you to the board for really engaging in robust discussions, really pushing, you know, all of us as a group to clarify our goals, bringing us back to our values. All of the conversations that took place here today, or many of them anyway, we had at that board level and had sometimes repeatedly. So thank you for the engagement of the board through all this. Okay, next slide. And while I'm on thank yous, of course, thank you to all of you, to our members, for your attention and your engagement today. I'm really excited to see this change take shape. It has been an honor and a pleasure to carry on this work and to have served as the CAM president over the past year and a half, and I look forward to continuing this important work. We love hearing from all of you. And, you know, again, one of the huge goals of this governance reform process is for us to better engage our members, midwives, midwifery students across our country. We really love hearing from you. And so here are some of the ways that you can reach us and share our work with your networks. Our social networks and online presence are listed here. Moving on to our next slide, I think I would like to, oh, not quite, but I would like to put forward a motion to adjourn the AGM. Oh, sorry.
Do you want to, CJ, maybe just do these 3 slides, our little promos, and then we'll adjourn?
And then, sure.
Flip
Yeah.
it? Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is an exciting slide. So yes, let's front this. I really look forward to seeing all of you at CAM's in-person national conference, which will be held in Calgary, Alberta, from November 12th to 14th of this year. The call for abstracts is now open. We really encourage you to submit. We encourage you to share that call out with your networks. And you have until April 7th to submit a presentation, not, of course, a fully developed presentation. Our program should be completed by early May-ish, and registration will open in the spring. So again, keep your eyes on your inboxes for that. Next slide. We also wanted to remind you of this new e-learning platform that we have, which is the result of you know, strategic direction from the board, and then a ton of sweat and energy from CAM staff, which has a number of courses available in both French and in English at no cost. We encourage you to visit camlearns.canadianmidwives.org. It's a really beautiful platform, and more content will be coming. And then lastly, we want to remind you about our podcast, Strength in Practice. The latest episode is called The Color of Birth Project, Uncovering the Hidden History of Black Midwifery in Canada. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. That sentence really makes me feel like a podcast host myself. And the episodes are really beautifully crafted, involving like a deep conversation with leaders, individuals, midwives, and then also like a discussion or conversation, a panel amongst a few midwives about the issues at hand. So we encourage you to have a look at that as well. Okay, I would now like to put forward a motion to adjourn the AGM. I move to adjourn this special meeting of members of the Canadian Association of Midwives. Can I please have a seconder? I see Barb Orland has seconded the motion to adjourn CAM's special members meeting. We will now vote.
CJ, while everyone is voting, we have a question from Betty Ann Davis. Is there any organization besides NCIM and PART that has these principles and structure in their organization? And if Alex is still here too, I'm sure she can speak to all the organizations she spoke to. Not to put you on the spot, sorry, Alex.
Thank you to all the thanks in the chat. Are there any organizations besides NCIM that have these principles and structure in their organization? I don't have that. I'm going to be honest, Betty, and I don't have a ready answer for you other than to say, you know, of course, doing that kind of like benchmarking or jurisdictional scanning was a part of the initial stages. And I do know that Alex has done so much education and time in the initial development stages of this process. And so looked to work happening all around.
I did attend quite a few with Alex, and the structure is fairly unique. Yeah. Sorry, Claire?
I'm gonna say the structure is unique, but I think like if we're talking about principles, I think like it's important to remember that a lot of the like a lot of the work was done by board members who are all presidents of their provincial associations. And there's ways that there's similarities in the provincial associations too, right? There would be times when somebody would say like, oh, we have that with our student members, or oh, we have that with our like membership. So I think there's ways that parts of it are in multiple different places, just not the exact structure.
Yes, thank you.
We just have a comment from Alex. Many organizations have a smaller boards that are informed by various advisory councils.
So I just put up the results. So the meeting is adjourned. If you want to still take comments and we can leave some time but the meeting itself is adjourned.
Thank you. And I see, Michelle, your comment. The last vote was on the bylaws as a whole, which is why it was just called bylaws, because it was on the document as a whole. We voted. Thank you.
Okay, so that means that there was no period of question about the new, because we saw the new model of governance, and then finally all the bylaws got voted, and there was no discussion on it, so I'm a little surprised about that.
Oh, I'm sorry to not have been clear about that. I apologize. The bylaws were the documents that supported the new structure. And so the vote, yes, was on the new structure, but then also all of the bylaws as a whole. We elected not to move through each individual bylaw, A, because of the time that it would take, and B, then the potential inconsistencies that could exist and, you know, legal questions. We were advised that the document as a whole should be moved as one.
Okay, I understand, but it's just about the new way of governance. Like, for example, for me, I would have seen maybe one less member from the international consultative and maybe one like more from the association, but where there was no period of questions on it. And I'm a little surprised about that people were not able to give. I know there's been a few consultations, but there's been no period of questions on that. I think it would have been beneficial. Thank you.
Again, I'm sorry that we weren't clear. That last discussion period was where we received questions on the structure and anything in the bylaws really, in addition to the previous engagement sessions that we've had over the last number of years. But I hear you that we could have been clear. Okay. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is adjourned. Good work.